I have something that I don't know if it's good news necessarily. I think it kind of resembles good news. So, as you all know, the world is over, society is over, death is imminent, and there's nothing we can do about it. By that, I mean that Palantir is taking center stage. And boy, is its stock rising. If you bought that at the right time, probably quite wealthy right now. Palantir is a very techie AI integrated data accumulation and I guess data refinement, data processing company. Basically, they are the evil dystopian cyberpunk corporation whose job it is to like monitor the exact acidity of your piss and what you've been eating lately, and every time you hiccup, put it all in a big database so that if the government ever has, for any reason, a problem with you, they can expertly take you down. You know, it's yeah, they're data analysts who are building a spy machine to monitor all American citizens. That's not, I don't, that's not really like an exaggeration at all. I think that's actually like very straightforwardly what they've said they're going to do. I have to say, it's a little bit weird to me, and I'm going to be conspiratorial about this, please, if you'll allow me. If you look up Palantir News, you see a bunch of articles talking about Palantir's stock price, which is a little bit, you know, the Trump administration has signed a deal with Palantir. They are going to be integrating data from the branches of government that Doge already dug into and scraped data from. Historically, the agreement has been that if a government agency takes information from you, they don't share it with other people in most cases. When you provide, so here's an example, okay? Here's an example. Illegal immigrants often pay taxes. The IRS asks them to pay taxes. And what they've done to incentivize this is to say, listen, if you pay taxes now, you are building up a better case for citizenship tomorrow, right? It's not going to make you look good if you try to get citizenship and you have to sheepishly admit that you've been in the US not paying income tax for 20 years, right? So pay taxes to us. It's in your interest and in ours. And in return to this, we will not provide your information to ICE. We won't do it. And that was true up until a few months ago. That's one of the reasons why like 4 directors of the IRS all quit in rapid succession. It's because like there was a pact of trust that has been shattered. And now ICE is scraping data from the IRS to, to confirm that people are undocumented, get a master list, right? You get me? It's like that, except all across the government. They used to do that with organized crime too. Yeah, makes sense. A gross breach of the social contract. Not just the social contract, but like the contract. Likewise, the government takes your data in a bunch of ways, right? Like some parts of the government know about your health data, right? Some parts of the government know about your, say, criminal record. But the general agreement has been like these individual lines of information, these databases on US citizens, should be used exclusively and selectively by the organizations that have need of them, right? Like the census communicates a lot of things to a lot of people, but they're not working off of every bit of information every department of the government has on you, because for one, that would be a logistical nightmare, but also like it would be a gross violation of your privacy. Do you want every police officer knowing your income, marital status, medical status, everything about you? Do you want every interaction that you ever have with every person in society to be pre-gamed by all the information the government has? What if you add in surveillance cameras? By the way, AI face detection surveillance cameras are already being installed across the United States. They have spy drones that go above us and monitor things like traffic and, faces as best as they can, which is pretty good, which means that it's getting reasonably possible. This is how they got Luigi, I think, by the way. It's getting reasonably possible for the government to just always know where you are, which is, to a lot of people, right, this is kind of like the cyberpunk dystopia that we've been warning about for a really long time, Yes, the face detection cameras tested in Israel on Palestinians. They've come home to us. That's probably how they got Luigi, by the way. It's the reason why we got extremely spotty information on how they got the tip-off on Luigi's location in a different state, miles and miles away from where Brian Thompson was killed. And the reason why somehow, even though it would be in the police's best interest, nobody received a payout for the tip, the promised payout for the tip to for Luigi. So the narrative from the government is that somebody recognized Luigi miles and miles and miles away from where Brian Thompson was killed. They called the police, and even though they were so far away from that scene, even though the police had probably been receiving many calls because of this ongoing manhunt, they identified him by his ID, called the police, and the police showed up there so quickly he hadn't even left yet. Just one person saying, oh, this ID, this guy looks like the person you're looking for, I bet it's him. And they showed up that quickly. And then, even though the person who gave the tip to the cops was supposed to receive $60,000 in a reward, the police said, oh, due to a technicality, we can't actually provide it. And nobody went to the media saying, hey, the cops fleeced me out of $60,000. Pretty weird, huh? Why? Illegal surveillance. It's everywhere. And that is 100% how they got him. Some people say that it was illegal surveillance done in the machines that take your order with like the automated McDonald's, you know, you that, which if I recall correctly, there was actually a lawsuit settled from Steak and Shake. Was it Steak and Shake? The Shake Shack? Which one was it? Where they were in fact using their cameras on those devices to like sell info. Was it Steak and Shake? Someone will confirm for me eventually. Yeah. What was I getting at here? It was Steak and Shake. You found the article. Okay, I'm not mad at you. Thank you. Steak and Shake installs facial recognition at self-ordering kiosks. I think this is how they got Luigi, and it's why they haven't been forthcoming about it, because if the government is in fact using information like this, it could be illegal surveillance, which would mean that it would be inadmissible in court, you know, would cause issues. So I don't know what kind of bullshit they're going to go with when they finally go to trial with this, but, you know, cops have tech that connects to every phone in a block. Yeah, I remember in The Dark Knight Returns, the second Christopher Nolan Batman movie, where he had the device that plugged into every phone and knew where everyone was. That's not sci-fi. They basically have that. They've had it for a while. It's not super new. But the point of Palantir is to take all of this information. It was just in the first one? No, it was in the second one, because the first one he fought the Scarecrow, and in the second one he fought the Joker, and he used it to find the Joker. The Dark Knight, whatever. The point that I'm getting at is that the job of Palantir is to take all of these disconnected systems of surveillance, legitimate ones, like, say, for example, the IRS getting your income information, and illegitimate ones, like these, facial recognition, surveillance cams, so on and so forth, and consolidate them into a master list that they can use to effectively control the country with no opposition. A democracy would cease to matter at this point. They would have essentially limitless control. The only thing that they would need are competent administrators of the data, and as long as they have that, there's no way to stop them, basically. It's pretty much like an endgame scenario. You have to rely on entropy to end things at that point, or like a meteor hitting the Earth, or like a big volcanic eruption or something like that. Competent? Well, the people over at Palantir are competent, you know, unfortunately. This is what people are going to be driving around. Oh, lovely, from the Palantir YouTube channel. We'll have to show something off to the investors, I suppose. No point in being subtle. No one's stopping you anyway.
Modern battle space. Titan is the Army's next-generation, deep-sensing intelligence ground station enabled by artificial intelligence and machine learning, and represents the first of its kind modernization program.
That's great.
Models, wherever the mission takes them, even as the threat landscape evolves. What sets Titan apart from prior capabilities is the decisive advantage that the software-enabled capabilities will give to soldiers. This includes faster, deeper sensing that can handle modern sensors at scale. More accurate targeting enabled by cutting-edge AI and machine learning.
It's a big sensor truck. It's a big sensor array in a truck. And presumably it's armored. So, you know. She's literally just saying words. This shit means nothing. Well, apart from, okay, so you've caught them, okay? The evil company that wants to control the world is deeply insincere, okay? You've caught them. Don't make me go back to that. What was it? Was it Peter Thiel, or was it the other guy who said the beautiful thing about technology is that it allows us to ignore democracy? You know what I'm talking about, right? ICE has been using a license plate reader program that allows the police to track people across the country. AI-enabled camera networking. This is, by the way, in case you were wondering, like, where the hype for AI was coming from, the hype for NFTs was being driven by people who wanted to legitimize and enhance involvement in cryptocurrency because it's an unregulated financial speculative market that they can use to make lots of money. The people who have been pushing AI into every single product have been, in large part, deep state MIC-backed ghouls who need very sophisticated AI, well-trained AI algorithms so they can incorporate it into the real reason this technology exists, which is not to help you with your Google searches. It's not to help you create fake images or videos. It's to help create a surveillance state unparalleled in all of human history. Technology that would allow them to essentially control the country with no opposition. You know, you wouldn't even be able to, I mean, it would be proper 1984 business, right? You think you're getting a job if you have a history of making social media posts defending unions? Why the f would they accept you? That's a risk. And that company pays out big to the government and their affiliated programs to make sure they have access to the database. Yeah, I'm considering hiring this one person. They have really good extracurriculars. They have a really good GPA. Let me just run their name and basic information into the program. Day later, you get the info back. Oh, it turns out that they have sympathy to Palestinians. Don't want that. That's a risk. That opens us up to liabilities. Nope. It sounds like a conspiracy theory. It's so fucked up. Nothing that I'm describing right now, by the way, is speculative. This is literally what it's for. That is literally what this is for. We're essentially going to be getting the Chinese social credit score, except it's going to be 100,000 times worse and more integrated into society at every level. You know, we've made our jokes, we've had our fun, but yeah, this is where we're at right now. And privately owned, yippee. Well, it doesn't really matter, right? They work directly with the government. They're effectively agents of the government. Democrats will not stop this from happening. In fact, they don't even talk about it. I am being conspiratorial, by the way, about the fact that when you look up Palantir News, you see people talking about their stock price, the street, Money Morning? Seriously? Not a bunch of news articles on the fact that an AI surveillance company has been given unprecedented access to data scraped from Doge in the federal government, that Trump is working directly with them to do this? None of that? No? Okay. Yeah, I'm going to be a little conspiratorial about that. Oh, also in the news, Yahoo Finance and Fox Business. That's great. Trump's AI investment will be huge for Amazon, Palantir, and more. Oh, no. Great. For sure. No, for sure. It's just numbers. It's just an investment opportunity, guys. It's not the end of society as we know it. Come on. MSN has an article on it that frames it as an investment. Palantir is reportedly building a US spy machine. How should you play Palantir stock here? Oh my God. From 1 hour ago. It's like a parody. Like the kind of shit that you would see in the headlines in like a satire, you know? Arasaka just trademarked the human genome. Big play for stock market movers? Like that kind of shit, you know? Wayland Yutani reveals like new xenotech integrated spaceship travel and colonization device investment opportunity? I don't know. According to the New York Times, the NASDAQ-listed company is creating a database of Americans based on personal data pulled from various federal agencies. Trump taps Palantir to compile data on Americans. Hey guys, can somebody give me a non-conspiratorial answer to why when you Google Palantir News, a New York Times article of this scope isn't one of the first things that comes up? Really? 2 Yahoo Finance articles before this one comes up? You really think there's no collaboration at all between Google and Palantir? I don't believe it for a moment. I only have conspiratorial answers to this. Would you like to know more? Ass timeline? Yeah. The Trump administration has expanded Palantir's work with the government, spreading the company's tech, which could easily merge data on Americans throughout agencies. This has never been done before in human history, you know? We have speculated about this kind of environment for a very long time. But even the previous totalitarian regimes we've written about, like the Soviet Union under Stalin or Nazi Germany, had to rely largely on word of mouth. That was the big difference. They didn't even really have surveillance cameras back then. Back then, like the most the state could do to spy on everyday citizens' lives was to make sure they had plants everywhere. SS officers, you know, people who would quietly listen, networks of contacts. At the end of the day, it was a human project. This essentially replaces that. Technologically, it's far more effective at achieving exactly the same goal. That was just a tech issue, though. They 100% would have given the tech. Yeah, of course, but they didn't have the tech. Now we do, and it's here. And they won. I know we looked at this before, but the Trump administration has expanded Palantir's work across the federal government in recent months. The company has received more than $113 million in federal government spending since Trump took office. According to public records, including additional funds from existing contracts as well, Department of Homeland Security, the Pentagon. Representatives of Palantir are speaking to at least 2 other agencies, the Social Security Administration and the IRS, about buying its technology, according to 6 government officials and Palantir employees with knowledge of the discussions. The push has put a key Palantir product called Foundry into at least 4 federal agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security and the Health and Human Services Department. So they have your income information, they have your health information, they have anything pertaining to your criminal record, you know, anything covered by Department of Homeland Security, certainly stuff regarding ICE. Thanks to the IRS, they have a lot of undocumented people's information as well. They also probably have your nudes. Yeah, probably. Doesn't this affect Europeans as well? Oh, sure. The reach of this will be global. They will annihilate the Amazon rainforest to power this shit. It doesn't even take that much. We're not really talking about mass generative AI or anything like that. We're just talking about like data aggregation. Thanks to modern tech, it is shockingly efficient. Before AI, it would have taken an enormous bureaucracy to manage this kind of information. But now, yeah, Palantir Foundry. Palantir Foundry is a software platform offered for use in commercial and civil government sectors, popularized for use in the health sector with the National COVID Cohort Collaborative, a secure enclave electronic health records, COVID-19 pandemic. Clive Lewis MP supported the campaign saying Palantir had an appalling track record. Foundry was used for the administration of the UK Houses for Ukraine program. Nice, nice. Just data management, data aggregation. There might actually be microchips in the next vaccine rollout. They don't need them. You've got a phone. They already hear everything you say. Have any judges addressed this yet? I don't think there's any way to stop this, unfortunately. Like I said, this is just too big. Also, the Democrats don't really seem to have any interest in stopping this. It's beyond them too. Even if they had the political will, you know, I don't think you could expect much from them. Even cons don't like this. Well, that's the itsy bitsy tiny bit of good news. I saw a bunch of tweets to this effect, and I wanted to go digging for more, but I just don't care enough. This is from PNW Gorilla. Presumably he's my neighbor. Just some far right, you know, oh, I live out in the mountains, I've got 50 guns kind of guy. There's never been something the government has done or planned on doing in my lifetime that I am more against than Palantir. I've seen a lot of right-wingers, a lot of Nazis specifically, who are against this. I think a lot of the Nazis are against it in large part out of self-preservation because a total surveillance state would probably eliminate them too. Because keep in mind, the goal of like a total surveillance state isn't like, what if we went as far right as possible? A total surveillance state could permit actually a relatively wide range of political views. Anything aberrant enough to be considered dangerous to the surveillance state, though, would probably be systematically eradicated, you know, on every level, in a way that could never be dealt with. The thing is, the Palantir business is popular with no one. Nobody likes it. It's not a culture war issue Republicans have spent a long time preparing their constituents for. If anything, it's the opposite, right? As totalitarian as they are, Republicans have always marketed themselves as being in favor of small government, freedom, liberty, blah, 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 blah. Obviously, they don't believe that, but the main reason they don't believe that is because they want to use the power of the state to hurt queer people. They want to use the power of the state to hurt black people or something, you know? This would affect everyone, and everyone knows it. Nobody believes that a system like Palantir would be constructed and exclusively target minorities. We all understand what this represents, you know? The fact that I'm pretty sure like some of the people who run Palantir are Jews probably doesn't go down well with the Nazis either. Maybe if like all the people running Palantir were like Nordic white people or something, they'd be like, yes! Based in Hyperborea pilled, but I don't know. It seems to me that this is anti-human enough and broadly, you know, effective enough that nobody will like it. I guess the question is like, will people disliking it make a difference? You know? Isn't it good though? It makes it easier to violently overthrow it. How about you violently overthrow your mother for enforcing a bedtime and ask you to have breakfast? That's not candy. Violently overthrow Palantir? What are you talking about? The whole point of this ultimate surveillance apparatus is that you have the ability to crack down on social dissent before it materially manifests against you. Like, why do you think there was no violent overthrow within the Nazis, right? There were tons of people in the Nazi regime who hated their government. If you have a totalitarian state, you can't really rise up in that fashion. And so the thing that a lot of people don't understand about the way these things like form and develop with regard to totalitarianism, like specifically, is that past a point, you no longer, it doesn't matter anymore, right? You only need like a baseline level of complicit fear to keep things going. To be fair, there were many attempts at it, Vosh, and some came close for Nazis. No, there were many attempts at assassinating Hitler, but not a big populist revolt against the idea of like a statewide surveillance apparatus. That's a lot larger, and it's a lot harder to direct antagonism against it specifically, you know? That's true, Theta, that's true. Now, the real power, of course, of a surveillance apparatus like this is that you have the ability to rein people in without even making them feel oppressed, right? Everyone in the regime of the Nazis who didn't like the Nazis felt the boot on the back of their neck. They were scared, and a lot of them were complicit, but, they did feel that boot. The goal of Palantir is that you don't even feel the boot. You don't even notice what's wrong. The government knows everything about you, sure, and so do the corporations who contract with the government, and so do the police, but isn't it always like that, right? Wasn't it always like that? A lot of it's done without your knowledge, consent, or awareness, so it doesn't feel like anything to you, and your day-to-day life isn't being like, it's not like you're being led from activity to activity under armed guard or anything like that. You could live a life comfortable and content the whole way through without ever meaningfully interacting with the surveillance state. It's if you start becoming more of a political dissident, or you start accepting like unacceptable opinions, or you start, violating the law in a way that, not just like hooliganism or whatever, but you start doing something meaningful. And that's when, in very subtle ways, your life just starts falling apart. Would you prefer social collapse over living in a surveillance state? Yes, easily. I think most people would answer yes to that, yeah. I think that what Palantir is doing is maybe the most terrifying thing anyone can think of. Like in the scale of like what direction civilization can take, I think most people would agree with that. Yeah. One thing that gives me hope, Vosh, is any conspiracy with lots of people involved like this. But that's the thing though. It's not a conspiracy, right? It doesn't need, that's the thing, right? With the Soviets under Stalin, or the Nazis, you did need a conspiracy, as in no. When they say conspiracy, they don't mean that it's not happening. What they mean is like the collusion of a bunch of people towards a secretive end. But you no longer need a big bureaucratic web or anything. You no longer need like a complicated system of contacts to do this. You literally just install the cameras and collect the data, and that's it, So I don't know if there's any conspiracy that there'd be leaks towards, right? Like somebody could go, oh, the government knows your shit, and then everyone would go like, yeah, obviously, that's what governments do. Your fears are justified. These have existed and be used by police illegally for over a decade, and barely anyone knows they exist. Yeah. Like, keep in mind, people right now are talking like, well, I would simply rise up. You've been subject to illegal NSA spying programs for most of your life. The Patriot Act, like, you may know about it, but like, I'm sorry, have you risen up? You already live in a surveillance state where the government illegally surveils and uses that data to select dissidents and worsen their lives and target them. COINTELPRO, I mean, this goes back to the 60s. Like, none of this is new. Illegal government surveillance. Like, so if you think like, oh, people will rise up against Palantir, why? Yeah, Snowden did what he did. Why are people going to rise up against what happens next? So how is this different then? Because it's much more comprehensive, and because it can be used, it can be centralized and consolidated in a way that could potentially manifest in a much more negative way. But it is a continuation of existing trends, right? You use Soviet Union or Nazi. Is there a reason we're not using China as an example? Because China is not totalitarian. China does like use surveillance very aggressively, but they are not totalitarian in the way that the Soviet Union under Stalin or Nazi Germany was. Yet, oh sure, well they could become that in the future, but at the moment they just don't care to. Maybe because it'd be a pain in the ass, but like presently, even Mao's China. Mao's China, we're talking about totalitarian in the context of a surveillance state. Mao's China was brutal. As for totalitarian, I mean, Mao's China, the death and the suffering had more to do with this very active, like, cultural revolutionary project, and also not knowing how the fuck farms work, more so than, like, total surveillance, to my knowledge. Like, I think there's a very big difference between, like, political persecution in Mao's China versus, like, Stalin's Russia or Stalin's Soviet Union. Obviously, they're both bad, but I'm talking about, like, a specific kind of, like, surveillance derived totalitarianism. You kind of need surveillance for totalitarianism, right? You can't really, like, an absolute monarchy isn't totalitarian, right? It's still authoritarian. You need like a complete total involvement in the life of the average citizen. What's the difference between authoritarian and totalitarian? Authoritarian just means you have like an undemocratic leader, and you have like varying extremities with that, right? Like you can have Napoleon or whatever, but you have like an undemocratic leader. Most systems of government throughout history have been some kind of authoritarianism, right? Like democracy is the exception, not the rule. Totalitarianism is very, very, very specific, where Usually, an authoritarian government mostly doesn't really care what you do in your day-to-day life, as long as you pay your taxes and don't oppose the regime. Those are the main things, right? Pay your taxes, don't oppose the regime. Apart from that, whatever. That's usually the rule. In totalitarianism, through surveillance or through like a bureaucratic network or whatever, the life of the average citizen is scrutinized in its entirety. The state becomes invested not only in the taxes and the not dissenting, but in like a holistic, like from waking to sleeping, you are under the eye of the state. And they are concerned with everything you're doing. Are you sufficiently patriotic in how you have your breakfast? That sounds crazy. That's a real thing these governments get into, right? Are like monitoring all your conversations, an enormous state bureaucracy to manage disappearances and thought crimes. Yes. Yeah, no authoritarian would give a shit about a thought crime. If anything, an authoritarian would kind of revel in the fact that you have to leave it a thought crime, right? Like a regular dictator would just go like, well, yeah, you can think whatever you want, bitch, pussy, stupid pussy, But to a totalitarian, the thought crime itself is unacceptable. Even people thinking dissent have to be weeded out, which is exactly what Hitler and Stalin did, to the best of their abilities. So China is more authoritarian and North Korea is more totalitarian? That is correct, yeah, for sure. Yeah, North Korea is 100% totalitarian. I don't know if they do it as extensively as like Stalin or Hitler did, but they definitely are, at least from what I've seen characterized of them from the outside. China's totalitarian, come on. They're just not. Like, they're obviously authoritarian and they're an authoritarian surveillance state, but they're just not. China doesn't even come close to Stalin's or Hitler's excesses with regard to like vigilant surveillance and so on, with monitoring every element of everyone's lives. Most people in China, I imagine, live more or less normal lives, Obviously, their government's authoritarian, but I have a feeling that for most people in China, you can just like be a guy and just live your life and gripe about the government sometimes, and you're probably fine. I don't think they're disappearing people for saying like anything negative about the regime. Maybe if you like dedicate yourself to it enough, like if you're an activist, like then China's the biggest surveillance state in the world. What do you mean? Yeah, that's surveillance, not totalitarianism. The internet there is censored and people arrest you if you say the wrong thing. Okay, people arrest you if you say the wrong thing is an extremely broad... I'm pretty sure that China arrests relatively few people for its population. I mean, it would depend on the specifics of how it was done. The social credit system's pretty totalitarian. I just don't think that's true. Like, there are lots of people from the West who go visit China or live in China who have met Chinese people, met friends or whatever. And I think that from the West, we exaggerate how much they crack down on free speech. They do. I'm not saying they don't. It's not a free society over there. But I think it's a lot more comparable to like, I don't know. What's another like authoritarian government that occasionally, like somebody said Egypt earlier. Would Egypt be a good example? Like, Egypt's authoritarian and they do go after people, but like for the most part, people just kind of live their lives there. What the fuck? No, these are horrible comparisons. What the fuck are you talking about? Are you kidding me? Saudi Arabia or the UAE? What? That's not even remotely comparable. Jesus Christ. Turkey, Egypt, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan. Are you racist? What do Turkey, Egypt, Kazakhstan, and Turkmenistan have in common with each other governmentally? Are you just naming like scary brown countries? What the tell me what characteristics do the governments of Turkey and Turkmenistan share apart from the fact they start with Turk? Brown people? That's true. That's pretty true. These people don't know what totalitarian means now. I mean, it's a difference that I care about, I guess. I think like a good point to make would be like for me a clear line would be the Soviet Union was totalitarian under Stalin. It definitely wasn't under Gorbachev, and now under Putin, it still definitely isn't. Most people in Russia are just living like wretched, poverty-stricken lives, like not really engaging much with the government. They're not like, it's not as though they're having like the agents of Moscow like breathe down their neck nonstop. Can society be totalitarian for part of the population, like Palestinians in the West Bank? I don't really think that the Palestinians in the West Bank live in a totalitarian government at all. But I guess so. I would say like the Uyghur Muslims probably lived in something pretty close to a totalitarian state within China. Russian kids in school get arrested for not supporting the war. This is not what I'm talking about at all. You're just listing bad things they do. Also, what do you mean for not supporting war? Do you mean publicly protesting against it? Because that's a pretty common like authoritarian thing. Localized in Moscow, I think you could argue for totalitarian levels of control, at least in terms of surveillance. That's just a surveillance state, not totalitarianism. They don't have like the apparatuses that are monitoring the day-to-day lives of all the citizens. Which is more extreme, fascism or totalitarianism? Totalitarianism is almost definitionally going to be like the most extreme in any comparison, but they're not like juxtaposed concepts at all. They overlap like pretty goddamn well. Fascism allows for the social control that allows for the creation of the bureaucracy and networks that enable the totalitarianism, right? Which is one of the reasons why Palantir is so scary, because then you could do totalitarianism without needing fascism to rile the population up. Fascism is a totalitarian ideology. That's not necessarily true. Does North Korea meet your definition, or are they too poor? What does poverty have to do with it? Also, I already said yes. Where have you been? Capitalism, fascism, authoritarianism. Fascism is definitionally authoritarian, but capitalism can also be authoritarian. You can also have a totalitarian capitalist non-fascist state, which apparently is what we're going to get here if Palantir gets their way. These terms they're not like little Hearts of Iron 4 tags that you assign to a society that gives them like a little, like mutually exclusive little identifiers or whatever, like little tabs, okay? They're broad overlapping definitions that refer to different elements of society, okay? Just put the scary political terms in the bag. Yep. It would be worth it sometime to go over like historical accounts of totalitarianism in Nazi Germany or Stalinism, because like some of the like anecdotes there, some of the bits there are like fucking psychotic. Like genuinely like horrifying shit. You know what I mean? Like a lot of the stuff in 1984, like the idea of people being disappeared by police because of stuff they said in their sleep, is just taken from history books. That happened. Like children would hear their parents like, you know, muttering something under their breath while sleeping, and they would be, as they were taught to, report it to the police, and the police would assume that the muttering in one's sleep was a sign of a guilty conscience. So they would abduct the parents and torture them for information and probably kill them. Like that shit happened, you know? That was more of a Stalin thing than a Nazi thing. I think the Nazis just straight up killed a lot more people. What about pre-Stalin Soviet Union? Lenin definitely had his moments, you know? He definitely had his moments, but like it's pretty hard to compare that to Stalin's paranoia, you know? I guess a way you can say it is maybe totalitarianism is late stage authoritarianism. No, you don't need to draw a connection. It doesn't need to all fit in like a YouTube diagram. You don't have to do that. It's not necessary. They're just terms that describe things. They're not Pokemon evolutions. Stanley Payne wrote that indeed both Mussolini and Hitler failed to achieve full totalitarianism, and of Mussolini it was said that his regime was not totalitarian, excluding merely fascist Italy from totalitarian regimes, who also thought Nazis became totalitarian only in 1938 to 1942. It makes sense that the Nazis would get less totalitarian as the war went on, because it takes so much, so many resources, so much like state effort to run a totalitarian government, that as the war went on, you kind of can't manage it anymore. According to Payne, both Lenin and Stalin were totalitarian. That's interesting. I would have to read more about Lenin, I guess, to have a real opinion on that. Feels the same with Israel? Nah, Israel is a settler colonial project, not really totalitarian. Israel is actually incredibly uninterested in the day-to-day lives of Palestinians in the West Bank or in Gaza. It just wants to kill them. Like it's like the premise of totalitarianism is that the apparatus of the state, the intelligentsia, is turned inward towards the citizenry, and their behavior is monitored and mandated. But that's not really how they treat Palestinians. Palestinians are an other. They're like an extigent. They're an external group who are subjected to misery and pain, torture, and death at the whims of the colonial masters. But it's not really like a totalitarian thing. The surveillance is just used to enable the murder and torment. This fucking guy. Wow. Ideological repression, censorship. That has quite a few main articles. Good lord. I mean, the Doctor's plot is the one I know the most about. I imagine most people know the most about. Einstein's theory of relativity was subject to public denunciation. Many of his ideas were rejected on ideological grounds and condemned as bourgeois idealism in the Stalin state. A policy of ideological repression impacted various disciplinary fields such as genetics, cybernetics, biology, linguistics, physics, sociology, psychology, pedology, mathematical logic, economics, and statistics. Lysenkoism, Over 3,000 biologists were imprisoned, fired, or executed for attempting to oppose Lysenkoism, and genetic research was effectively destroyed until the death of Stalin in 1953. Historical falsification of political events. read about literally anything the NKVD did. It's actually comical how far they went. Okay, I don't know this one. What is this one? Traitor to the motherland family members. A term in Article 58 of the Criminal Code of Russian SFSR, the amended article dealt with the criminal prosecution of the wives and children of all people who were arrested and convicted as traitors of the motherland in the Soviet Union during the Stalinist purges of the 1930s and later. Okay, never mind, I've heard of this. All cases considered by the Special Counsel of the NKVD, wives were subject to imprisonment into labor camps for terms of at least 5 to 8 years. That's crazy. This diva, man. In 1938, Stalin reversed his stance on the purges, criticized the NKVD for carrying out mass executions, and then executed NKVD chiefs Genrik Yadoga and Nikolai Yezhov. That's great. All right, man. I don't know why I'm looking at all this. Sorry, I guess I'm just kind of like, you got to get familiar with this now because soon it's going to be what we're all living in, okay? You know, you have to prepare yourself.